my youngest daughter was born my first year of law school. And I guess looking back, and this is what I've tried to do with my daughters, there are many paths. There's not one path that leads to the end. There are many paths, there are many approaches. There are many different ways to get to actually different goals, and learning itself is a goal. You know, my parents did a tremendous amount for my brother and I respect that, and actually they provided that foundation for me to discover those paths. I hope I help my daughters do that at an early age.
Terrific. Emma?
I'm a product of Newark Public Schools. So Summer Avenue before it became Roberto Clemente, then Barnett Street Elementary School, then Arts High School. Before then I went to Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee, then back up to New York for a Union Theological Seminary, and then to Drew Theological Seminary. And I'm also the sixth of 7 children born to a single mother here in Newark. And you know, when I think back on what my educational experience was like here, I do remember adversity. I do remember you know, the adults who had very low expectations of me because of my family circumstance. But when I fantasize about this question, I wish that I was conscious in the moment of the incredible sacrifice that people made, the people who stood in the gap. I think about Frank Walters, who was the first African male teacher and principal I had, who was just an amazing man in my life. You know, I think about Mr. Howard from Arts High School. I think about the nameless janitors at Fisk University who knocked on my door at 7:30 in the morning and said, "We know you have a class at 8 o'clock and you're in bed. Get your up and get to class, and I will wait for you." But I would go back and I would thank in the moment those people who stood in the gap.
Very good. All right, we're going to ask Gus to be the last commenter on this question, and I'll remind him that his response stands between you and the food.
Richard used to work for me. And I knew at some point today in this program, he's going to come up with something like he just did. I think, well, the other thing that I think is important, I've been over the years to several events that the magazine that brought you all here today had put on. And some of them were not high-class operations like this one is. So I think they ought to be commended and reminded that it was the Newark experience that is raising them up 5 levels instead of 1 at a time, and to keep it in mind. I never thought when we were invited to come that this is the room we'd be in with this view out the window. This is not, and a lot of you in this room agree with me but won't say it. This isn't what I expected when I agreed to come to this.
At least from what I know, value neutral. The question is what kinds of values are we promoting? And one of the things that I learned with Girls Incorporated, again, trying to look at this backwards and what are we really trying to produce? One of the things that we learned at Girls Incorporated is that when you're working with young people, you want to be intentional, you want your engagement with them to be intentional and compensatory, right? So when we talk about intentional, we talk about, although, you know, it is appropriate for us to get together to just waste time together, just to be together. But a lot of what we are trying to do is to pass on something intentionally. and you pass on values intentionally. But compensatory is about understanding the world that our young people are growing up in, and understanding just what the challenges are that they face, that we all face as a community. And so how, in our own gatherings, in our own communities, do we give them the experiences that are going to help them navigate that world? And so, you know, it's not we just put together these nice package programs and, you know, sort of parcel them out. It's that we really think about what our young people are up against. So if we're sending them out into a world that is about me, mine, and my own, and you hit me and I kill your dog, if it is about, you know, a world where, you know, poor people don't matter, where oppression, you know, is the norm of the day, then we do have to think critically about our engagement with them and how do we send different messages. And it's not going to happen just by just getting together in the room. You have to think about it and make it.
Cheryl Boone.
Okay. This question is one that I'm going to answer it in a way that reflects a more limited knowledge base in terms of my knowledge of how churches operate. But one of the things that I've always felt strongly about is that African Americans in particular have to begin to think about reducing our dependency on public institutions for meeting some of the things that we are concerned about, especially education. And that we have to think in terms, that's not in any way am I suggesting that we should not take advantage of it. We should fully exploit those resources that are available to us, but we cannot allow ourselves to become dependent upon those things. And that means then that the institutions that meet the needs of our people have to step up to the forefront. And I believe that the churches need to be one of the hubs for providing African American history and cultural practice societies, because the public schools will not necessarily do that. And I think so. Along the same lines, in terms of what when we're trying to meet the kids' needs through the church, I think that adults have to spend probably more time listening to their children and listening to what they have to say. We talk to them and we seem to tell them what we think they need, but we don't listen to what the messages that they offer. So in constructing programmatic initiatives for children, I think it's important that they play a part in structuring that process. So that's...
Reverend Spagner. Yeah, right. It's a little long, but I got it. Can a spiritually and culturally grounded education serve as a buffer against the dominant popular media culture and its associated industries that seek to package and sell negative, highly materialistic lifestyles as fashionable to our young, our poor, and our unlearned? And if so, how?
Echoing Albert Simpson, the short answer is yes. I'm reminded of the passage of scripture that speaks and says, greater is he, as it was stated, but greater is God with a capital G that is within us than the lower G God that is in the world. I believe the answer is a resounding yes. And how can it be done? It needs to be done the same way that Christ did it. We need to become incarnate. We need to lose ourselves. We need to come out of our comfort zones of the cathedrals and the sanctuaries and realize that we have been called to be in the midst of suffering people, and our educational system is in trouble. Families are hurting, young people are not being cared for, and their needs and developed, and therefore our future as a society and a community is in jeopardy. For all of those reasons, I'm reminded of the passage in Jeremiah. We, the people that are the elect, if you will, we've got to realize that we need shalom or peace for the entire community. So the only way to get there is to get involved. We cannot have this separation of state kind of mentality, and for some reason we want to pray on Sunday morning at 11 but not be engaged in the what is happening in our communities on Monday through Saturday. So yes, it requires our involvement, which means sacrifice. It means discomfort. It means dealing with friction, all right, that we might ultimately have peace and wholeness within our community.
Thank you. Janine?
Thank you, Richard. Some of you in this audience today happen to be part of another educational forum where I was the moderator, and you have come up to say to me, this discussion today about education is so different. I mean, those of you who are there, you're nodding your head. It's so different. And this needs to be packaged, and we need to sell the recording all across the state, maybe across the country. I wonder what's so different about it. And because I've been in a lot of educational reform discussions, I can tell you what's different about today. It is spiritually based. We have combined this discussion of education, children, families, and community in a spiritually based environment. So my answer to the question would be absolutely yes, but I would like to also remind many of you, especially those of you who are dealing with children. Back 50-some years ago, when I was in kindergarten, right on up to 8th grade, you started the day, somebody had to read a passage of the Bible, and then you sang either My Country 'Tis of Thee or the Star Spangled Banner, and then you pledged allegiance to the flag. And sometimes in that environment, if you were a Jehovah's Witness, you didn't pledge, or you didn't sing the song, but you certainly participated in listening to the word. And it went on from there, and then I became an English teacher. And I had some of the kids who were probably ADD but hadn't been diagnosed. It's hard to get them to get together in the beginning of the class, but we did the same thing. And then 6 years later, I became a lobbyist for the biggest union in the state of New Jersey. And I found myself testifying before the assembly as to why we no longer needed this in the classroom. And now we look, and that was my job, and now we look 2011, that but for the fact that some kids could come to school in the morning and hear part of the scripture and sing My Country 'Tis of Thee or Star Spangled Banner, and put their right hands over their chests and recite the allegiance to this flag. Many of them don't have any of these variables in their lives at all. They don't go to church, they don't pray, it's not in their homes. The only place they would have gotten it was in the school. So I would love to see the day that some of these elements are brought back into the educational system, because it really, really does make a difference in setting the tone.
Reverend Gamble?